Welcome. In this video, I will take the grand tour of release management for Visual Studio 2013 and talk to you about how it works, all the different components, and we're just going to basically set the stage for how to do releases later on. In order to do what I'm doing and actually use this tool, you'll actually need TFS 2013 Update 4 preferably. You'll need Visual Studio Release Management 2013 Update 4. This includes the three components, the client, the server, and the agents. How is that actually architected? So we have the client that is basically connected to the RM server. The RM server is in turn connected to RM agents. So I only have two here, but you can have as many as you want. Or you can actually connect to a PowerShell DSC version, which is remote PowerShell if you want, or to actually run DSC, so desired state configuration scripts. The RM server in turn is connected to a TFS server in order to actually get the builds that it's actually going to deploy to those different environments. So before I actually start doing the tour, I'd like to set up some words so that when I'm actually clicking around, you have an understanding of what I'm looking at. So the first is server. So in the context of release management, a server is considered either an agent-based server or an agent-less server, which is a server that's running PowerShell, remote PowerShell. Environments in this context are a group of server forming a deployment environment. So essentially we can have an environment might be dev, and dev might be composed of a database server and a web server, for example. So release paths essentially are a chain of environments forming a deployment pipeline. So essentially I could have dev, test, UAT, production, and each one of those environments forms a chain as we're actually deploying our build throughout all those environments. They can there's different release paths both for agent-based and for vNext, which is the PowerShell remote PowerShell version. So components basically are a configuration made up of a build, the tool that's actually going to execute. So it might be run a script, for example, or create a new IIS website, etc. And some configuration variable that are actually all stood up together that form that component. Those component in turn are then used into a release template, which basically is a XAML-based workflow where you actually drag your components and fill up all of your configuration variable, which are actually going to be used for your actual deployment. So when I talk about vNext means it's the second version of release management, and essentially it's mostly for remote PowerShell and PowerShell DSC. So for the execution, we're going to take a tour of release management for Visual Studio 2013, and I'm going to explain the various artifacts, namely that are available in RM, namely the servers, the environments, the release paths, the components, and finally the release templates. So let's actually start to do the tour right now. Okay, so I actually started the release management client, and I'm in the administration tab here. So here we basically set up our environment variables, the things that we actually need for all of our things. Manage TFS basically sets us up to our TFS server. Our pick lists are basically metadata that's going to be used in the environments and the components and the release paths to help us give it a generic name. So in my case, I'm actually using dev, test, UAT, and prod. If in your environments you have integration or other things, you can basically set up the way you need to set them up. Next, we have the technology types, which basically is, again, a bunch of metadata that you add, which essentially will be used to help identify what the server actually supports. If you have multiple servers and you're letting people create environments, it's helpful to know what's available on each one of those servers. Then we actually have manage users. So because this product was bought by Microsoft a little bit later, it has its own user database and it's not connected to the users in TFS. So currently you have to recreate all of your users in here. And if I open a user in my case and I have my AD account, my name, I have my email address, do I want to receive notification or not? Am I a release manager? Is this considered a release service user? In this case, it's not, it's me. So, and then it would tell me which member of which group I belong to. Then I can actually create some groups. So there's the everyone group. I can actually add some AD-based groups. So if I need to basically bring a bunch of people from an AD group, I can actually do that over here as well. The inventory section basically is a list of all the actions and the tools that are available to you. Those tools and actions are used in the XAML release templates that we're going to look at a little bit later. Then we have the configuration path. So in here is where we start talking about the glossary I talked at the beginning. So for example, in this case, I have the servers. The servers are essentially where am I deploying my my build. So in this case, I have myself, which is this server over here. I have a UAT server, which is another machine which is currently offline. And I have the server itself, but as a remote PowerShell endpoint. So this is considered like a VNext server if you want, and this is considered an agent because there's an agent and that's the version of the agents that actually is installed on this machine and its current IP. Next, we have the environments. So in the environments, as you can see, I have two different environments for dev. I have the agent-based development environment and I have the VNext dev environment. So because I'm actually showing this demo for both types, I have one for each one of them. So let's open up like the dev environment, for example. So dev is just a name I'm going to give it, who the owner of it is, then some notes and this description if needed, and then basically I'm going to link to the dev environment any number of servers that form this dev environment. And to do that, I would click on the link and I would have a list of all the agent-based servers that I can basically take and link it to this particular environment. I would then save this environment and be back here. As for VNext, it is very similar, but instead of linking agent-based server, I would link servers that are considered remote PowerShell. I don't have any more, I just have one, which is myself. And since I've already linked it over here, it's not giving me any choice to actually link some new ones. So for example, I'm going to open the UAT environment with agents, and you'll see that this one has two servers. So essentially, this is how we create environments. Fairly simple. Assign a name to it, link to specific agent-based or agent-less servers, and then give it a name. Next, we're going to talk about agent-based release paths. So for example, I'm going to pick this one, which is essentially what I want to do here is create a pipeline that will go from dev, test, UAT to prod. So I'm actually going to open that up here. And as you can see, we have different stages. So in this case, I have 4 different stages, which are all my dev, test, UAT, and production stages. And each one of those stages basically is attached to an environment. And this environment is one of the 4 that I currently have on the other side. Now each one of those stages has 4 steps for which is we can basically create some barriers, if you want, before things are actually done. So the first thing is, do we accept that this build or a build will actually be deployed to this environment? Once this is accepted, then it goes to another section which says, do we accept that it's actually going to be deployed? Once it's going to be deployed, then we actually go to the validation step. So once it's deployed, it's going to stop again and it's going to send an email to another person or group and say, do you accept that this is actually working? And if it is, then it's actually going to just basically send to the next step, which is another list of approvers to actually send it to the next stage. And then each stage is the same thing. So we can automate these things by just clicking the automate here, and essentially it'll bypass the acceptance and it'll just basically go all the way to production in this case. So those are the configuration paths. For the VNext path, it's very, very similar. Again, same list of things, but now we actually need to use VNext environments as opposed to using the agent-based environments. Next, we have the configurations. So I can actually create some components. So in my case, if we remember from the videos we were kind of looking at, I have my demo website. I have 2 components. One is the agent-based deployment, and the other one is the agent-less or the remote PowerShell deployment. And we're going to look at deployments and which script and how they work in a future video. So currently, if I actually open my demo website, you can see that we start by setting up where our build is coming from. So currently, I want to copy everything under the drop location ops script over to my agent, and then run a particular script to execute my deployment. Next is the deployment tab. So here is which command or which tool do I actually want to use. So in my case, I want to run a PowerShell. So I'm basically just going to use the tool that says command line runner, and it's going to ask for a command line with the name of it, what the arguments are for, and then if I need different users and all that to actually execute that. So I'm going to see that in the template in a minute. Next, we have environment variables. So in my case, I have 3 environment variables that I can use. I have an encrypted password, then I have environments, an env environment that I'm basically going to replace in all of my web config later on. So I want to replace this in my web config after the installation. And then which release template is that used in? So next we have agent-based release templates. So based on my agent-based release templates, I'm actually going to open my demo website here, and we should see the XAML that represent my workflow. So in my XAML, I can see that I have a bunch of different actions that I can drag and drop into my workflow if I wanted to. My recommendation at this point is don't use anything but PowerShell. So I have my component here. If when you actually open this for the first time, you won't see your component. You actually have to right click and add, and this will bring you a list of the current components available. And what you want to do is pick one and link it to your workflow, which I have here. So I already did that. And here it's going to list all the servers that are part of the environments that you're actually looking on. So in dev currently I have one server and it's here. If I go to UAT, we're going to have 2 servers because I had 2 in my environment. So if we go back here, what do I want to do? I'm going to drag my component on this board. I'm actually going to drag the server first, then I'm going to drag the component on it. And what do I want to do? I want to execute PowerShell, and in PowerShell I want to run my PowerShell script. And once I have all this, I can actually just basically right click, copy those deployment steps, and then go to my next stage and basically just paste them in here. But now I'm actually going to change all of this thing to be test instead of dev and all those different things. Once I have all this set up, then I'm ready to actually start a new release. And we're going to look at that in a new video. So in conclusion, we can see that this is a tool to deploy things, and it fits very well into our DevOps strategy, and it's something that we should look into as far as deploying our stuff. It's something we should look into when we're talking about deploying our application using the Microsoft ecosystem. And you can find some more information at this URL. Thank you for your time.